back to a special weekend episode of the Pax What She Said podcast. I'm one of your co-hosts, Maggie Loney, joined as always by Perry Goldstein. And this week, we have asked for your help. We've wanted to do a mailbag for a while because there's so much to talk about, and we like hitting on a bunch of different topics. We obviously just went through the draft and the schedule release, and OTAs have started. So it finally feels like football is getting closer and closer to being back. So, Perry, we got some really good questions. I mean, we asked on Twitter for some feedback, and you guys absolutely delivered
Yes.
and really got us thinking. So, we're excited to kind of work our way through these.
I know. Delivered is right. You guys came through with these questions, so I'm excited to answer them. I think they're going to be really awesome discussions. May even lead to full episodes at some point because really, really great topics. So let's dive in.
Yeah, let's get started. Robbie at RoboClops on Twitter asked NFC North starter swap 2024 edition. I asked last year, so we'll ask this again. Love this question last year too. You get to trade starters of the same position in the division. So the example that he gives is Josh Myers for Frank Ragnow. Make your pick. Who and I'm assuming that's just any NFC North. You don't have to do all three. Just if you can swap player for player, who you're taking and why.
Whoa.
He gives arguably one of the best
Yeah.
options already in Josh Myers for Frank Ragnow, but not going to take that one then because that is that's too easy. But what do you think?
How do I get Brian Branch with Xavier McKinney? Can I trade an Anthony Johnson Jr.?
How dare you? Poor man.
That's my no. I mean, he was going with the ones in OTAs. That's probably a little bit of a cop out, right? So who would yours be?
I don't know. I've been honestly thinking about this since I saw this question, and I'm struggling here. And I think, the offensive line picks make a lot of sense. I think that they have, if not the best, a top 3 offensive line in the NFL, talking about Detroit here. So, like, Taylor Decker is intriguing. You lock down your left tackle spot, and you're just good to go. The defense is also really interesting to me because I feel like we haven't seen what Jeff Hapley operates yet, so we're not able to, like, get a strong sense. I think, like, Aiden Hutchinson would be fantastic, but can we swap, like, JJ and Igbare? Like, do we have to swap, like, Preston Smith? Because I like Preston and Rashawn, but so I don't
mean,
know.
if you did do the Preston Smith swap, you're going younger.
True.
So
Sorry,
I
Preston.
think that's a pretty good swap, although it would not be fun to see Preston in that Hawaiian blue.
Yeah, all right, that's what I'm going to take, but I'm going to feel really, really bad about it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. Otherwise, I mean, like, I think obviously it's hard to trade for a guy that hasn't taken an NFL snap yet, but like wide receivers are interesting. If you traded, like, I don't know, Christian Watson, I wouldn't trade away. Romeo Doubs, I wouldn't trade away. But if we're allowed to trade like Malik Heath for Amon-Ra St. Brown or like Roma Dunze, I'd be like, I would pick up the phone.
I mean, I could send Samori Toure for Justin Jefferson.
I'd be okay with that. Just bring
That's
come on over,
likely
Justin
not.
Jefferson.
We're talking starters here.
Yeah.
So
But I mean, I think truthfully, honestly, if you can add Justin Jefferson, you don't care who you're giving up, right? I think you'd give up Christian Watson or Romeo Doubs. Like, it would just, it's Justin Jefferson. So
yes, I agree 100%.
So that was a great question. Thank you. We kind of copped out, but I think the answer that I'm sticking with is unfortunately Preston Smith for Aiden Hutchinson.
I like it, Mag. It's a good one.
All right, let's move to PJ at Kenny Clark Rocks. PJ Hunter, thank you always for listening to the show, PJ. See you on Twitter quite a bit. What can you tell us about Michael Pratt's role for this team and what we should expect out of him? Who are your picks for tough cuts this year? So that's really interesting. I'll let you start, but I'll round it out.
Yeah, so I think Pratt's role is he's likely fighting for QB2. In my opinion, it's hard to decide or I guess decipher what to expect out of him just yet, considering we haven't seen much of him in camp. And so going into camp, the expectation should be that Sean Clifford is QB2. Sean Clifford looked great last season. He is the exact like backup that you would want. I think in limited spots, you don't want him to have to play, but I feel confident that he could come in for like a series or two, right? Any stretches without Jordan Love, the Packers are screwed. So it doesn't matter. I think the Packers really took Michael Pratt as like a developmental quarterback, and he has a lot of tools that they really like. They love to take a guy with a lot of potential, and who knows, maybe they flip him and trade him and get some picks out of him. I think that's probably where they're at with Michael Pratt at this point, unless he turns into, like the next great late round quarterback. But the Packers are not looking for a starter. They didn't take Michael Pratt as like Jordan Love's successor. They're likely trying to develop him into a really solid backup option opposite Sean Clifford, as like battling it out for who that QB2 is. I'm sure Michael Pratt will handle scout team. That's sort of where I see him fitting in, at least in his like red shirt, first year. And then we'll see how his development goes.
Yeah, and I mean, like Brian Gutekunst had said at the combine even that they want to draft quarterbacks. They always want there to be a quarterback competition. And I think, the selection of Pratt maybe makes the roster construction a little bit more difficult because in previous years, the Packers have historically kept two, and then had a third on the practice squad. If they fall in love with Pratt, or Clifford, and they just don't want to lose either of those guys, that could claim a third quarterback spot on the active roster, which then, where are you sacrificing elsewhere? So I do think that's an interesting conversation, but we do know that Matt LaFleur loves to develop quarterbacks, loves to work with them. Tom Clements is there as well. So a really nice room for young quarterbacks, and curious to see both of them when they get into training camp. But second half of that question then was, who are your picks for tough cuts this year, if there are some? You could argue that the quarterback that doesn't get the backup job might fall into that. But I'm curious your thoughts on this, but I think the two positions I think about right away are wide receiver. The bottom of the wide receiver depth chart, we're going to be
Mhm.
attached to some guys that probably aren't going to make the team. And then inside linebacker was the other position that I thought of. Obviously drafted two. You've got Isaiah McDuffie already. You've got Quay Walker. I love Eric Wilson. I was so excited when they brought him back. He's a core special teamer. But at some point, you've drafted all these guys who are going to have to start on teams. And I'm just not sure, like, some of the vets are going to be able to only be teamers at this point.
Yeah, I agree with you. Wide receiver is definitely where my mind goes first, just because that room is so rich with talent. I think the Malik Heaths, the Bo Meltons, the Samori Toures are going to be fighting for their spots at this point. In terms of tough cuts, that one is, I think, a different question, right? I think if a Samori Toure doesn't make it on the 53, no one's going to be surprised. Again, to your point, like an Eric Wilson not making the team is not necessarily a tough cut. Although it's tough for anybody. I should say this with a little bit more care. Like, all these guys deserve to be playing in the NFL, right? From like a human perspective. Like, I also think about the offensive line.
That's where I was going next. Yeah.
Right? They're bringing in, like, I don't know what, I would have to count them out, but somewhere in the teens of offensive linemen. Not all those guys are making the 53. So, this is like make or break for like a Royce Newman, who is likely not going to make the team this year, in my opinion. So, they just drafted, an abundance of offensive linemen who aren't going to get cut. Brian Gutekunst does not cut his rookies. So that's 3 spots that you kind of know are locks, unless, they do the cut, bring back on the practice squad maneuver. I'm also kind of looking at running back.
I was gonna say, I think the toughest cut would be AJ Dillon, but I guess I don't see it
100%.
happening.
I don't see it either, just given because I had this exact conversation with Andy Herman on Pack a Day when we were talking during our episode. And I think there's a case to be made on both sides, right? My case is, unless AJ just looks so bad in camp that it's like he's fallen off a cliff. He's not going to bring any value to the team. We can't keep him. I have really low expectations of that happening. So you keep a guy who knows the system, knows the offense, the coaches trust, who you can trust in pass pro, who can catch passes out of the
Locker room
backfield,
leader.
locker room leader, right? Well respected. If anything, knock on wood, happens to Josh Jacobs, I know that Matt LaFleur would rather have AJ Dillon out there than any of those, other backups. So I would have a really hard time envisioning them, not keeping AJ Dillon around.
I agree, but I think that probably is the toughest of the tough cuts.
Right.
Next we have Joe O at Joe from St. Cloud. He says, "You have to give one wide receiver on the Packers a mega near the top of the market extension right now. Who are you giving it to?" Which is a very good question.
Okay. Repeat the question. So is it only guys who are coming up on their contract, or it can
No, it's
be
just you have
anyone?
to give a wide receiver a mega contract. Any of the Packers wide receivers, and who are you giving it to? I think there's only two answers to
Yeah.
me, and it's
I
Jaden
mean,
Reed or Romeo Dobbs.
really?
I don't think you can give Christian Watson a mega deal right now. And I mean, like, I know that he said that, strength and conditioning, they think his hamstring issues are going to be fixed, and I hope that that is the case. But I don't think, given what we've seen already, that you can give him a mega deal.
But you're giving Jaden Reed a mega deal after one season?
Yes, because I feel like he has shown who he can be, and in a wide receiver one role would rise to the occasion. And I'm not like trying to diss Christian Watson. I just think that I think they're different sample sizes. I don't know how to explain it. Like,
I don't put Romeo Dobbs in that category just because I don't think Romeo Dobbs is ever going to be a guy who is a mega star. And again, that's not a disrespect to Romeo Dobbs. I think he has a very like specific role on this team that's never going to warrant a mega deal. Um, he's important, and obviously Jordan Love trusts him, and he really showed up in big moments. But he is not who comes to mind. I think my two are Christian Watson and Jaden Reed. And I put Christian Watson in that category because if when he is healthy, he is such a difference maker and he is such a playmaker that if you're projecting out, right, you're doing this as a projected out, you know that he's going to be in like an absolute star. He just has to stay on the field. So you fix the hamstring issue, you have your star. I agree with you on Jaden Reed. I was just curious. I do also think that he's going to be a mega star. I can't envision any of the other guys in that room, though. Not yet, at least. Let's see one more season of Dontavian Wicks and then
I
come
was
back
going
to
to
me
say
with this
it'll be
question.
Dontavian
And
Wicks that
then
ends up
and
as
then come
the.
back to me with this question. Yeah.
All right. Next, we have Humbug at Z Humbug. Which player from this draft class is a sleeper for extended playing time this season?
Talk to me about Marshawn Lloyd.
Okay.
Talk to me about our new running back. Okay, here's how I feel about this. Here's how I feel about this. And I think maybe I'm a little bit not biased towards the offense because we don't know a lot about Jeff Halfway's defense yet. I think that the defensive starters, I'm thinking Edge Cooper, I'm thinking Javon Bullard, like I do think they're going to play, right? I do think they're going to get extensive playing time.
Mhm.
I think there's going to be inside linebacker rotation. I still think Quay is inside linebacker one. Obviously, Xavier McKinney is safety one. And I don't know how, we just don't know who is going to play what role yet. I think Marshawn Lloyd is walking in here as RB2 and is going to get some serious, serious touches. And yes, Josh Jacobs is a little bit more of that every down back that we haven't seen in Green Bay in a little bit, right? But Matt LaFleur loves his running back rotation. He loves his pony package. And I think you give Marshawn Lloyd the ball in the open field and he's going to hit it and go. And as soon as he starts to show what he can do in this offense, especially paired with the passing game, it's going to be really dangerous and he's going to be hard to take off the field.
I like that. In terms of like sleeper, I immediately thought of Evan Williams. I just think that he is flashing already, in OTAs. Like I think his athleticism comes in. He's got really good like play speed. He's got good game recognition, and I just think he is a really fun option either at nickel or, in certain dime packages if you want to rotate him in. We know, like you said, Javon Bullard's going to play, or should we expect him to play opposite McKinney? But I think if we're
Wait,
talking
who
about like
knows though? Because
right,
Anthony Johnson Jr. got all the looks at safety one, or
it's true.
safety. Yeah.
But I mean, like, I think if we're talking about like a sleeper that we wouldn't expect, I could see Evan Williams like carving out a role for himself as a potential nickel or dime back, like pretty early, depending on what the coaches are looking for.
Love that.
All right, let's talk John Codman at New York One Packer fan. How many games will it take for the new defensive scheme to gel and be successful?
It's a great question, John.
I mean, and I think it's tough, right? Because they're starting the season against the Eagles, so not an easy team. They get home and they take on the Colts, not an easy team. Like it's not like they're, and I know NFL teams a layup, right? But you're talking about two really mobile quarterbacks that can run and extend plays with their legs, and a lot of the quote unquote struggles that the Packers had in previous seasons, they're going to see those pretty early in the season against Jalen Hurts, Anthony Richardson, and those receiving cores, are no joke either. So I don't know about like how long it'll take until for them to gel. I don't know if it's going to take like a certain number of games. Um, but I don't think that we should expect to see a finished product for a quarter of the season at least. Like
Yeah. My mind went to a quarter of the season. I do think there's something to be said for a majority of the vets are on that side of the ball, right?
Mhm.
And so when you get a lot of guys who have a lot of playing time together, even in a new scheme, they already know how to communicate with one another. They already know each other's skill set. They already know what to expect from one another. I do think you have that added like leap a little bit. And I also don't know, how much Jeff Halfley is going to I mean, he's going to call some things they already know how to do more often. And yes, maybe they're changing over to more guys with their hands in the dirt, so it could be that the defensive line has more of a learning curve, but I just don't think that he's going to be asking guys to do things that they've like never done before. Right? They're just going to have to do it a little bit more often, and just learn how to communicate better. And I do think, again, like you're getting in a Xavier McKinney, who is a vet, obviously a very good leader, a captain, very high football IQ. I actually don't think it's going to take as long as you think. I think this learning curve is all going to happen this summer.
And I think it might look different, or it might look similar to fans, right? Like the players will realize it's different. The scheme will feel different to them, especially if we're doing the swap, like you said, from a 3-4 to a 4-3 base. Like certain players will have their roles change a little bit, but I'm not entirely sure that we as Packer fans are going to see them trot out onto the field and be like, oh, look, he's playing middle of the field close. Look, there's Xavier McKinney as the robber. Like, I don't think that we're all going to be like, oh my God, this is so different from Joe Barry. It'd be cool. Like, I would love that, but
hopefully other than them being more successful,
right.
less points given up, right? Less, third and soft. But to your point, I agree. Yes, I think there's going to be growing pains, especially if there are some rookies who are starting. That to me is more of where I think the success, non-success is going to come in. But like you're getting guys like Preston Smith, Rashawn Gary, Jair Alexander, Xavier McKinney. Like these are guys who have years of that experience under their belt. I don't know if changing a new scheme is really going to take any time at all for them to be successful.
This is a good question because it kind of ties into exactly what we're talking about. If you have anything else to add to this, but we the people at Fobaka on Twitter says, I think Hafley's aggressive style defense will result in more sacks and takeaways, but I still haven't heard much about how they'll be better against the run. Thoughts?
So I just think, and I'm curious, I want your thoughts on this because I feel like this is like kind of your bread and butter here, but I think more defensive linemen up front, more hand in the dirt. I don't know. Bigger bodies up front, likely
Yeah, I mean, like I think you're
leading to more
playing
run stuffs, right?
more
Like,
hats to the ball, obviously,
yeah,
that's a part of it. I think if you look at like the Halfley defense and some of the creative blitz packages that he sends or the stunts that he runs, his inside linebackers play kind of close to the line at times and his safeties drop. And that's why I said Evan Williams, because I think Evan Williams he was really good at tackling behind the line of scrimmage when he was in college. So all of those things will contribute to stopping the run. You know, if you
yeah.
have even like Javon Bullard playing in the box instead of having two safeties deep, like these are all things that I will have to see how Jeff Hafley will implement it. But yeah, I mean, I think there's certain ways that they'll be able to improve in the run game. But I also think that it is largely going to come down to the personnel more than
I
anything.
was just gonna say, like,
Like,
is he able to come in and like get better run lane integrity out of the
mhm.
guys? And are they filling the gaps, like shooting their gaps better and, being able to spot if it's a run or pass? Are they watching film of their opponent? Like those all go into this. This isn't just new scheme dependent, right? So I love this is a little bit of a tangent, but I heard a story about how Xavier McKinney watches practice film right after practice happens, and then he breaks it down for the secondary immediately after. So he practices, goes back, watches practice film, and then has everyone come in and he breaks it down for them.
That's incredible.
Um, incredible. So again, like if the run game looks different, and I'm not going to say it's because of Xavier McKinney, this is just an example of like run game looks different or just the defense in general looks different. Yes, new scheme. But to your point, Maggie, like we have new personnel in the building who are doing things like this. This all funnels into the product on the field.
And part of the reason you draft a guy like Edgerrin Cooper is that you hope, and I really don't want this to be like a knock on Devondre Campbell because he was an all pro in Green Bay, but part of the reason that you draft the players you draft is because you want to get more athletic, more attacking in certain packages when you're on the field. And like, I think that's why the Hopper pick makes a lot of sense too, is because he's somebody that they can just line up as a downhill thumper, see ball, get ball, and get immediately to the run. So, yeah, I mean, like, not to discredit the guys that were in the building already, but I do think that that's part of why you sign the guys you do, the way you construct your roster. And Halfley's just going to hopefully put those guys in the best position to be successful and make an impact that way. A lot of these questions are kind of building on each other, which is nice. Packers fan at Packers fan 1923. Which is more important for Christian Watson to step up as a true wide receiver one or for Quay Walker to step up as a true linebacker one?
I
That's a
think
good
this is
question.
this is an easy one for me. I saw this one and I was like, love this, but this offense is built around like not necessarily needing a wide receiver one. And don't get me wrong, as much as I am rooting for Christian Watson to break out, and if he does become a one, incredible. I think this offense is going to be unstoppable if he is on the field all the time. I think it's imperative that Quay Walker becomes that true linebacker one. Again, it doesn't have to be Quay. It could be if it is Cooper and Quay is more of a rotating, whomever it is. I think it's even more important to this defense and like the operation, like foundation of this defense, that they have a true linebacker one than to this offense needing a true wide receiver one. They do wide receiver by committee. Well, we've seen how Matt LaFleur likes to change his packages, keep defenses on their toes, right? Way more important, I think, to have that like centerpiece
Yes.
at linebacker.
I agree 1,000%. I mean, and the Packers 2023 season is the case study of that. Nobody had over 800 yards receiving. Still, Jaden Reed has 10 touchdowns, Dobbs has 8 touchdowns. Like, the ball was spread around, guys are contributing. Nobody expected, the seasons from Wicks and Melton and Heath, the guys we keep talking about that came in and immediately had to make an impact. And yet they performed the way that they did and arguably could have, should have gotten to the championship, right? So I think, and I'm not saying that like I thought the defense was really the problem in some of this either. We don't need to go rehash old games, but I think as far as the Jeff Hafley defense and the way that the NFL is trending, the importance of inside linebacker, we see it like ebb and flow, and right now it is absolutely just an insanely important position. And like you said, if it's Walker or if it's Cooper, great. But I think a prominent, dominant inside linebacker matters more for this roster, the way that it's constructed, not necessarily
100%.
for the NFL.
Yes, 100%. And look, we as NFL watchers see what dominant linebacker duos do to opposing offenses. I mean, you think about the Dre Greenlaw and the Fred Warners immediately come to mind. The Ravens have two, right? If the Packers have now, a Quay Walker and an Edge Cooper, it could change everything. Like, I just feel like the linebacker position is becoming, to your point, kind of a linchpin of the defense. And they have the potential now in the athleticism, and the communication, the football IQ, all of it, to have a really incredible duo. They mold it appropriately. And we know the holes, right? We've gone into it ad nauseum with Quay. He's still a work in progress. But they've drafted someone now who can come in and even be, add to that like potential dominance. But to this question's point, like, I just think linebacker is way more important to the Packers than a wide receiver one is.
Agreed. We're some of these questions are similar, but Furial at Furial_COA asks, assuming Jair is cornerback 1 and Nixon is in the slot, who wins the CB2 slot, and what under the radar player is going to be a key on defense?
So you, I think, have answered the under the radar player. So cornerback is interesting, obviously, for obvious reasons, because Eric Stokes is just the big question mark, right? It's, how does he look? Is he the same? Has he developed? Like, I think he's 2 years behind now in terms of his like necessary development. And the Packers also have Carrington Valentine, who you hope to take that like second year jump, who looked great in his rookie season when he had to step up and be CB2. I actually think, and again, I'm rooting for the success of Eric Stokes. I find it hard to bet on, oh God, I'm sorry. I hope he's not listening to this. He's not, but I hope he wins this spot. I really do. I was such a fan of him coming out of the draft. Like, I think we all know this. I think it's going to be Carrington Valentine to start the season. And I say this with the utmost love of just, it's really hard to come back from this kind of injury and miss basically 2 full seasons. So to rotate Eric Stokes in dime package it, whatever it is, he's going to play. But I'd have especially like with the way Carrington Valentine looks, it looks like he put on a lot of strength. I think he's going to thrive in the Jeff Hafley defense. Like, I think that this kind of scheme is exactly the kind of scheme that's perfect for a player like him. I don't know. I'm betting on him taking that second year jump and not really getting taken off the field.
I agree with you. I think it's Valentine. And I think we're going to see the same way that I talked about like Evan Williams. I think this nickel and dime, these sub packages are going to just be a ton of rotating. And I think it'll depend on the personnel that whatever the offense is doing too. I could see packages where, Oladapo's out there because he's like your biggest thumper. Or if it's like a 3rd and long, maybe you've got Eric Stokes out there, or you take Nixon off the field. Like, there's going to be so much variety, I think. But as far as like your 2 corners, I think it's Jair and Valentine to start the season, and I really hope that Stokes comes back and just lights it up, and because he had such a fun rookie season, but yeah, the injuries themselves are just hard. Like
It's
it's
hard. And his speed is like, if Stokes comes back with his same level of speed, it's a trait that is just like it's impossible to replicate, and they're going to use it and they're going to need it, right? Because you're looking at some of these teams the Packers are playing, like the Dolphins, right? And the level of speed that's on opposing offenses, right? And to your point, if they want to mix and match and Stokes looks like himself and he looks like his rookie season, he's running a 4.240 on the field, you need that. But to look at what Carrington Valentine was able to do last season, to look at how he looks in OTAs right now, I mean, he's bigger noticeably, and to think about the little bit more aggressive playing style that Jeff Hafley's going to call, it's just hard to imagine he's not going to have that CB2 spot locked down.
I agree with you. This next question, I think I just can't wait to hear what you're going to say. I love this. So Shiv Luthra at GB Chic 12 asks, "You're able to clone one player on the team to have two of them. Who is it?" Like this. There were a lot of fun ways to take this, but I'm really curious what you're thinking here.
So it's interesting because when I read this, my first thought, like my immediate reaction was Rashawn Gary.
Okay.
Like immediately I was like, well, obviously you want two Rashawn Garys. There are a ton of players, and the Packers have a roster chock full of amazing, talented players. I want to hear your answer, but the more I thought about it, the more I think my gut reaction stays true. I think you want two Rashawn Garys, because we are always talking about how Rashawn Gary needs that buddy, right? Sometimes he overshoots the quarterback. Sometimes he's a little bit too aggressive, et cetera, et cetera. Imagine if you had two of him, right? If one is, getting one of the tackles out of the way, the other one's gonna get to the quarterback, like they're gonna get home every time if you have two of him. Not to mention, he's an amazing human being, amazing locker room leader, has the most positive attitude. He works so hard. He like levels up everyone around him. I think you just want two Rashans.
So it's funny that you say that. Like that was your immediate thought, because the first time I read this question, my brain instantaneously said two Kenny Clarks. Like I just want two Kenny Clarks. And maybe that says something about me and the players that I typically covet on an NFL roster, but yeah, my brain, so I ranked them in my head and it was Kenny Clark, and then I said give me two Elton Jenkins.
Yeah.
And then Jair was up there as well, because two
Yeah, of
Jairs,
course.
but that would be so much attitude that I don't know if anybody could handle two Jairs on the same roster in the secondary. But yeah, to me, it was Kenny Clark for a lot of the same reasons you listed for Rashawn Gary. Like we talk about run stopping, we talk about Kenny constantly getting double teamed, and I guess it's really like an interesting debate too, because where do you think this team needs the most help? Like if you look at doubling Rashawn, he's taking snaps away from like theoretically Preston Smith. If you double up on Kenny Clark, who are you getting rid of? Is it Devontae Wyatt? Is it TJ Slayton? Is it Colby Wooden? Is it Carl Brooks? So I don't know. I thought that was a fun question though, but I think it's telling that we also pointed immediately to the front of the defense, because I think that's where they could use some of that
Yeah.
extra juice.
Jair was my second, obviously, but that is a lot of swag.
It's almost too much. All right. How are our, again, great segue. Capitan at Coach Sanchez Football says, "Hey gals, how are our edge players from last year going to adapt to playing with their hand on the dirt? On the ground, I should say."
It's so funny, this question, because like it's not like our edge players didn't play with their hand in the dirt under Joe Barry. So again, is it going to be more? Is it going to be less? I just don't know if it's going to be something they need to look. Of course, it's going to be something they need to adapt to. I just don't know how hard it's going to be. I think there's going to be some players that are going to thrive more under it, like LVN. I think LVN with his hand in the dirt is you're going to see a noticeable difference with him, right? Because he is like hand in the dirt defensive end / edge, right? I think it's going to be really, really good for his development and also keep him on the field more, which is what we want. I think you're going to see a jump from Devonte Wyatt, right? I think some of these like college guys who are used to playing this scheme are going to actually love this switch. And as to my earlier point, for some of these vet players, like they've been playing for so long, I don't know if these changes are going to be like too drastic for them.
Yeah. I think about like the personnel that the Packers already have in the building. I think LVN is like a perfect example of this. You nailed it. Um, one of the things we talk about with the Packers edge group is that there's a lot of bull rushing and power, and they don't necessarily have a ton of finesse. Like Rashawn Gary can finesse, he can bend, but they're like bull rushers. And I think that translates really well. And that was one of the reasons that I thought like a Chop Robinson in the draft was super interesting because he's kind of undersized, he's smaller, and he wins with speed. I think what the Packers do really well already is that they win with power. So if you had somebody that was undersized, like a Chop Robinson on the roster, it would be probably a hard transition to put him in at a defensive end. But when you have like a Preston and a Rashawn and LVN already, those guys, they're built for this. Like they aren't going to have any problem translating that aspect of their game. Last question, saved a fun one, one that maybe we don't have to think about as much, or maybe it's the hardest one for you. I don't know, but at Fobaka asked this one as well. My favorite Packers memory is the Don Majkowski to Sterling Sharp instant replay game against the Bears. What is your favorite Packers memory?
Just one?
I open to interpretation.
I have so many. I mean, the Super Bowl is obviously one. I think watching the Hail Mary in Detroit comes to mind pretty early on. The opening game against the Bears, where Rodgers came back out from the tunnel with his broken knee. I had just moved back to New York, and I was living at my dad's for a couple months before moving back into the city, into my own apartment. And we were so excited, right, for Rodgers to come back because he had broken his collarbone the season before. And we were like, damn it, not again. Like, not again. We can't lose him again. We can't do another season of this. And I was like huffing and puffing. I was like, turn it off. I'm not going to watch anymore. And my dad's like in his chair, like, no, we're going to watch the rest of this game. And obviously I don't go anywhere. And then we watched just like the most incredible comeback I think I've ever seen in my life. Probably will ever watch in my life. And it started a tradition for us because ever since 2018, it's 2024 now. That's crazy. My dad and I watch every home opener together, or season opener, I should say.
I love that.
First Packer game of the season together. So six years running now.
That man, it feels like that was literally like last season, but here we
know.
are.
I
Yeah,
know.
I'm glad you mentioned the Lions game. I vividly remember watching that one. I think I was living in my own apartment at that time, so I went to my dad's to watch it, and my mom was asleep. And my dad and I, when, Richard Rodgers grabs it, just started screaming, and we like wake my mom up from down the hall, and we're like, "You gotta come watch this replay." And she's like, "Are you serious?" Like I was asleep. So we like pull her down the hall, and we're like, "You don't understand how improbable this is, that this just happened." And like we're just like running around the living room, and she was like, "Okay, that was pretty cool." She's like, "You didn't have like, could have watched it like tomorrow, but that was pretty cool." So that was a really fun memory. Christmas Day when the Packers played the Browns was really fun. I've never been like away from my family on Christmas. So that was like kind of weird, but to go see, that was the Aaron Rodgers when he broke the record game, 443rd touchdown. It was
Yeah.
snowing, it was Christmas. So like that was just like a really fun memory. And then honestly, I think the home opener last year, you were there, obviously. Dusty was there. The comeback with Jordan Love, like to the start of what we thought was a new era of football. And now knowing what we know about Jordan after his first home start as the starter, the crowd going nuts when he came out. Like
The
we weren't
crowd
sure
was
what kind of
crazy.
reception he was going to get.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it was just like, so.
I was going to bring that one up because I feel like in 5-10 years, like when we, potentially look back, hopefully, on this next era, like you and I are going to be able to say, yeah, we were at his first his first home game at Lambeau, and it was a really wonderful, warm reception, as he so deserved. And yeah, the crowd was crazy, and they had that. I mean, it was not a good game until the fourth quarter, obviously. And then they had that insane fourth quarter comeback, and it kind of set the tone, I feel like, for the 2023 season, of just this like resilient young Packers team who was never going to let anybody beat them down. They were going to play until clock was zero.
Romeo Dobbs catching the go ahead and doing the love to the
Yeah.
crowd. So good.
Great
So
game.
good.
You know, you and I have seen some good ones.
Mhm.
We were also at the Lions win with Rodgers in the rain Monday Night Football season opener. I think it was 2021.
Yes.
Also with Andy Herman and Dusty. That was a great game too. Yeah.
Good times. Good times. But that
Great
could be its
question.
own show, honestly, at this point.
Yeah. Great questions.
Yeah, these were fun. Gave us a lot of ideas too that we might turn into full episodes, because 40 minutes feels long, but certainly doesn't feel like enough time to really dive into all these questions. So thank you, thank you, thank you if you sent one in. We appreciate it. Thank you as always for listening, finding the show on YouTube, liking and subscribing. If you listen in the audio format, if you find us on Twitter at PWSS Podcast, you can find Perry at Perry_Goldstein, me at Maggie J. Loney. We just appreciate you. And we love talking about the Packers. We love talking about football. And when we get to include you in that, that makes it extra special for us. So thank you for all of your support. And we'll be back next week with something. We don't know.
Another episode.
Go Pack Go.
Go Pack Go.